Hey developers, so today we are continuing on with our Bootstrap Vue app. We recently created this app right here where we can go to the next page, but we want to see if we can refactor this to actually talk to a Vuex store, and that way we can try to get our search working. So let's take a look. Okay, and if you don't know, my name is Erik. I'm a full stack software developer. I'm also a big fan of Vue. So make sure if you like this type of channel, click that subscribe button. That really helps me out. And leave a comment below on what you think of Vue Bootstrap. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. So last time we left off, we had this home component that we wanted to refactor to use Vuex. So the first part is to see if we can add all this stuff to Vuex first. So let's do that. Now, when I did the installation, I actually created a store folder. And it created an index because I chose Vuex during my installation options. And now we can go ahead and start adding stuff in. So obviously we want to add in jobs. And we're going to have display jobs. And we're going to have rows. Now, some of you out there might be thinking, do you really need display jobs? We could probably figure out a way to do without it, but just to keep this simple, I'm going to keep it. And shows, well, we're going to have a spinner later on. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but we're going to have a spinner. I'm going to leave it off for now. Now, mutations is where we're going to actually set things. So we're going to have set jobs. Remember, it takes a state, and we're going to have it passed in the jobs, and then it's state.jobs equals jobs. Pretty simple. And then we're going to have a set rows, and we're going to have a state rows. So there's a lot of boilerplate when you set up Vuex, but I think it's a lot easier than Redux. And that's going to equal rows. And we're going to do set display jobs. And we're going to pass it the display jobs. And then state.display jobs equals display jobs. Okay, actions we're going to get to in a second. But we're going to add one more called getters. And we're going to use getters to actually use to grab things, because we're going to map that later on. And I'm going to call it, you can either call it get jobs or just jobs. I'm going to call it jobs. And it's going to return state.jobs and rows. And that's going to return state.rows. And I guess I could have done this before. And we have rows, and now we have display jobs. That's going to return display jobs. Cool. So now we have our getters and our actions, and we refresh. There's no errors. That's good. So let's have our actions. Now, these actions here is where we actually can do asynchronous things. We can kind of do multiple actions at the same time. We can have actions call other actions. Once you're doing asynchronous things, always put them in the actions. Don't try to do them in mutations, because they won't work and you'll get errors. So what we need to do is we want the basic is fetch data. So our fetch data, now this is a little different. We actually have to destructure stuff, because this has a whole object in it that has like commit, dispatch, a bunch of things in there. We want commit. And what we're going to do is this is going to be where we do our asynchronous calls to our backend. And since we don't have a backend, this is where we're going to do our fetch call. Now, I know some people in some organizations, they don't put their requests to the backend inside actions. They do it some other way. You can extract these all into their own utility function and then import the utility function into your Vuex actions. Or some people don't do it inside Vuex at all. I think it's fine to put it inside a Vuex action. I don't see there's any real big reason. If you do, leave a comment below. And just for the sake of this one, we want to simulate that it's taking some time to do, because if not, it's just going to do it instantaneously. But we want to add a spinner later on. So I'm going to do return new promise, and I'm going to have it resolve. And I have my callback function here. And this is where I'm going to do a set timeout. It's going to be asynchronous. And in here, this is where I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to do a const res. I'm going to await the fetch of the jobs.json. And then I'm going to grab the value out of it. I'm going to await the res.json, like this. And then I'm going to resolve the val. And I'm going to put a 1 second timer on it. And it's giving me an error because I didn't use commit. So for right now, I'm not going to use it. Later on, I will. Okay, so far so good. So fetch data, grabs the data, resolves it, returns the promise. But you can see we didn't really do anything with this. So I'm going to create a new action. And this action is going to call fetch jobs. And you remember how I said you can have jobs, actions that call actions? Well, this is part of it. So I'm going to dispatch it. And this will become apparent why I extracted this out into its own action, because later on, make this async. But because later on, we might have two places where we need to do fetch data, and we don't want to duplicate our code in multiple places. So now I'm going to do const myJSON. And now this is where I'm going to dispatch. And then I just put in the name of the action. And once again, this is async. And so this way I can actually dispatch it and grab the information that I need. And so after I do that, I'm going to just put this information inside. I'm going to commit it, actually. Let's do this. Commit. I'm going to extract that out. And I'm going to commit. I'm going to put set jobs to my JSON. And then I have rows too, so I'm going to commit set rows. And that's going to be my JSON.length. Cool. So now I have a way to fetch the jobs, and set the rows. Let's see if this works. So all I need to do is dispatch fetch jobs for this to test this out. Okay, so I'm going to go to my home view, and here's my fetch data, but I'm going to just see if this works. I'm going to this.store.dispatch. By the way, this.store is just built into your Vue. Since we have the store installed, we can do this.store and grab it. Now we just do dispatch and the name of the action, which if we look at our index, was called fetch jobs. And one thing you can see here, if we do, let's see, if we go back here, this fetch jobs, it commits a few things. It's asynchronous. Well, first let's see if this just works. And the store.dispatch fetch jobs, and then I'm going to console log this.store.getters.jobs. Let's see what happens. So you can see here, this observer here, and it has a length of 0. And you probably figure out what's happening. We're doing this dispatch fetch jobs, but the jobs isn't done. It's not done doing its thing. So we're console logging it out, but it actually hasn't gone to the server and grabbed the information. So to actually get this to work, we kind of need to await it and to get it to do what it needs to do. So to do that, we can await the dispatch. So let's see if we await this, what happens. And this time we're going to say test. Cool. So now this time we see the test here, and we have all the observers, and we have all the information. So this time it worked. So we actually have the information from the store getters. So now we could see if we can start replacing a few things in here. And the way I like to do that is to use map getters. So let's take a look at map getters. So I'm going through a lot of different concepts here. Just maybe slow this down if you don't understand. This is all part of the Vuex documentation. But map getter, with an S at the end, is a way to really easily grab the getters out of our Vuex store. And the way we do that is we have a computed property. Computed. And that's an object. And then inside the computed property here, we do ... so we're destructuring map.getters. And then we give it the array of what we want to get. So we want to get rows. Well, actually, rows. And then we want to get the jobs for right now. Now, we already have rows and jobs in here, so we have a little bit of a conflict, but it's still, if we refresh it, see, jobs is already defined in data, rows is already defined in data. So let's not worry about rows. Let's see if we can get jobs changed over. So now we just have jobs. I can delete the jobs here. And instead of having to do this, I should be able to do, we dispatched it, this dot jobs. And this dot jobs dot slice. And then this dot jobs. Okay. Let's see what that does. Okay, so it worked. Let's see if we get any errors. Oh, so we did get an error. Jobs was assigned, but it has no setter. Oops, let me take this out. Try that. Cool, now we have no error. I just had this dot jobs that equals this dot jobs, and that didn't make sense. And yep, still works. So now we've extracted the jobs out to the getters and to our Vuex store. But really, we need to do display jobs as well. And we need to get some more pagination. So this is where it gets a little tricky. So let's go back to our index. So now we have our fetch data and fetch jobs. But we really want to be able to do pagination through it. So let's create a pagination. So we're going to async paginate. And from there, we want our commit and a state. And then this is things that are going to be passed in. And we can only pass in one value, so we have to pass it in as an object and then destructure it. So from here, we're going to pass in the current page and then per page. And that's yelling at us because we haven't used either one of those. So I'm going to do const start, just like we did before. Current page -1 times per page. And then we're going to have a jobs, which equals state.jobs.slice start. Remember, slice doesn't mutate the original array. It just returns an array, unlike splice. That's what the difference between the two is. Start +3. And now we can commit to set display jobs. And we'll put jobs in there. Okay, so cool. Now we have a pagination one in here. So is that enough to get pagination working? Let's take a look. So make sure we have to pass the current page and per page to it. So we'll go back to our home. And then instead of doing this, first we want to grab from our getters display jobs. We don't want to have it return in here. And this fetch data should actually set the this sets the display jobs, but we don't want it to be done inside here. So we'll go back to here. So we have my JSON here to this. So we have const here, const display jobs. We can put right here, display jobs. So now we're setting the jobs, we're cutting it for the display jobs, setting it correctly in there. Now we can come back to our home view. Don't need this anymore because this will do everything for us. We'll worry about the rows in a second. And now instead of doing it through here, we'll have to do this.dispatch and actually dispatch it. So dispatch this.store.dispatch, the name of it, which is called paginate. And then we send over an object. So we want the current page. And then per page, which is this.perPage, I believe. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, we got an error, that unknown mutation type. So let's look back at the index. We have a typo here. Set display jobs. Cool. There it is. Now if we hit 2, it's not working. But if we do 1, if we refresh it, seems to work off the bat, but it doesn't work if we move to 1, 2, and 3. So let's take a look here. So we do set display jobs. We send over the async. Now we're always grabbing the jobs, slicing it, and putting it in here for the display job. So, but there's a bug. So let's check current page and per page. So console log per page and current page. Make sure those look okay. And so if we hit 1, 2, we have 3 and 2. So that's working right. Oops, I see the bug we have here. This actually should be start. Let's try that again. So here's everything. Hit 2. Cool. So it seems to be working now. Let me get rid of these console logs. Okay. So now we have everything in the Vuex store except rows. So we could fix that. So we have set jobs. We don't have a set rows. So we could do commit set rows and do my JSON.length. So that'll set the length of it. Now, to get this working again, we can go back to the home. It's still working, but we have to change our getters to add rows and get rid of rows here and get rid of this rows right here. Save it all. Refresh it. See if it works. All right, looks like it figured out the rows, right? Cool. All right, so now we have everything in the Vuex store, including the rows. You see, this is much simpler. If I clean it up, a lot less rows. You can get rid of the console logs. Like super simple, just like 4 lines. Everything's done in the store, which is great. So now we have, since we have everything in store, now we could see if we can get this search working in our top header. So let's look at the top header. And right here, we just have this button. And we can change the button so it actually does something. So right now is a type of submit, but we have this form here. So we can add a @submit .prevent the default, and then we're just gonna create a new something called submit, a new method. Well, we'll call it search. That'll make more sense. Search. And now we can create a new search. So once again, create method object, search, and I'll do an alert test, see if it works. So I'll test, yep, there it is, test. Don't worry about this error, this is something to do with the plugin I have. All right, but we also need to create a data object because we want to actually save the data in there. And I guess I'll call this search text. and it'll make it nothing. And then the search text will need to be added as a vmodal to the bform input. So I could just do vmodal here, and this is two-way bound search text. So now if I come back here, instead of just doing alert test, I can do alert this dot search text, and should match what I have in there. So I hit enter. Oh, it says I have an error. Search text is not defined in the instance but preferred during render. Let's see here. I have the search text. I guess I have to put capital T here. Let's make it camel case. Now that should work. If I type in something here, cool. Now it's working. Now we actually need to dispatch this. So I'm going to create a new, we're going to do this all through the store. And I'm going to go back to our index for our store, this one. And we create a new option here, a new action. And this is going to be called search. And this one I'm going to have, that's not right, async search. And then the search, we're going to grab the commit and state. And we need to grab the text that's passed into it. We'll destructure that. So I'm going to const my JSON. And then this time I'm going to dispatch fetch data. And the reason I'm doing this is I just want to make sure every time I search we get the latest from the server, or latest from the text file of everything that's inside fetch data. And then I'm going to use a simple filter. So if I do my JSON, by the way, this returns the data too. So my JSON, and I'm going to .filter it, grab the value, and we're going to return the val.name. We're going to to lowercase it. And then we'll use that .includes, which is just a JavaScript function that looks throughout the text to see if anything's in there. I'm going to grab the text. I'm going to put a to lowercase on that too. And that should be it. That should give me everything in my, that should give me everything in value. We haven't used value yet. So now I'm going to dispatch. I'm going to create a new, something new that's going to update the pagination. Because we got to remember, we got to update the pagination. So I'm going to create something called update pagination. And I'm going to grab a commit and a dispatch. And I'm going to grab the my JSON, current page, and per page. And I'm going to make a comma there. So I'm going to commit set jobs to my JSON. So I'm going to set the JSON. I'm going to commit set rows to my JSON.length. And I'm going to dispatch paginate, which now I'm going to send it the current page and per page. So we still have a few issues here with my search. I haven't finished it yet. But now I can do dispatch update pagination. And this is the object I'm going to send to it, which I'm going to put in my JSON, which is the values. Or it's going to be, let's see here. I'm going to call it values. It's more than one. And then I'm going to send the current page, which we're going to just leave it as 1, and then per page, which remember is 3. Okay. We have commit and state here, but really for search, we just want dispatch. And this should be a string. And since we did that, I think that's all we want right now. So we have it here. So we have this update pagination, which with combination with search should do what we want to do. It's going to update the jobs and update the one thing it doesn't do is it doesn't update the display jobs. So actually, once we dispatch paginate, it'll update everything for us. Cool. So let's see if that works. So I put in ABC. Right now, let's go back to the home. We still have the alert in there. Actually, let's go to the top header. Alert. So instead of doing this alert here, we want to actually dispatch. So we're going to do this dot $store dispatch search, and then we need to send it to that text in an object. So we're going to send the text over as this dot search text. Okay, let's see if I got any bugs or errors here. I probably do, but let's see. ABC. There it is. It just shows ABC. By the way, there's that little bit of lag because I added in that lag. Cool. So ZZZ. Now if I hit enter, now we see all of them. And by the way, does the pagination work? Works. If I put ZZZ, you can see it went from 1 to 2, and it's still working. Cool. So now we have like a search through everything, through all our different jobs here. You can see we did have that 1 second delay. So let's add a spinner class to it to make it even better. So I know some people don't like mixing their like presentation logic in with their store, but I don't see a problem with it, and I've done it before. Let me know if you guys don't like that. So we want to add in a third one in here, which we're going to call set spinner. Spinner. Show spinner. Probably is the best one. We're going to leave that false. And, lots of stuff we have to do here. Set a spinner. And delete word here. Spinner. This is spinner. Cool. And now we have the state, and we need to add a getter for it. So we can call this show spinner, and this will be show spinner. Cool. All right. So now we have this new. Actually, this should be called state.show spinner. Okay. So we have the set, we have the mutation, we have the state, and we have the getter. So now up here, what we can do, so we're doing this fetch data here, and we're doing it in the search and in the fetch jobs. We're doing it in 2 different places. And since we put it all in one place, this is where we can do something different here. We can actually set the spinner every time we do a commit, or every time we grab it from the back end. So we can do commit here. And so we can commit set spinner to true right before we fetch it. And then right after we fetch it, set it to false. It's false. So that's pretty simple. Of course, once again, if you're paying attention really closely, you're probably wondering, well, we set the spinner false, but what happens if this doesn't resolve correctly and it fails? Then your spinner would show forever. So once again, given the importance of doing try catches and catching errors here, then you would set it to false. But we're not going to worry about that. We'll just assume it always works, and it will because we have the JSON file. But now we have this cool new show spinner that we can use anywhere, and it will only be true when it's downloading stuff from our server. And since we are simulating like a 1 second delay, we should see it. So I went back and forth where to add this, but it seems like the best place to add it is in the app view. So if we go back to the documentation, they do have a spinner, and they look like this. So let's just add a spinner then. Shouldn't be too hard. So the way I did it is, and you could probably think of a few ways to do this, but right under app, I created a new class called page, and then I did a vif on it, vif spinner. And then inside there, we use the spinner, and that'll have a class spinner. And we're going to use a variant on it of primary. I guess I really don't. I could probably just do it like this, primary. And then we're going to key is going to be primary as well. And let's see if we just put vf true here. Let's see, does it show up? True. And we have too many quotes. Okay. All right, yeah, cool. So here's our spinner at the top. Now we only want to show this if it's true. And also we want to kind of in the middle of the app and then kind of gray everything out. So we're just going to add a little bit of JavaScript or CSS, I should say. So by the way, this is just default. I'm just gonna leave the default in there. It doesn't matter. So I'm gonna put a page here, and inside the page, I'm gonna make the position absolute, and I'm gonna add a background, and this is the alpha channel. So we're gonna have 0, 0, 0, 0.3. Do I have too many zeros? Oops, one too many. Delete one. Okay, that looks better. And then we have a background color. We're just add the z index in here, 25, width 100%, and a height of 100%. I can type that right. It says overload function RGB has the wrong number of arguments. So let's see here. So we do need 3. There we go. So this is still in the wrong place, this spinner. So we can fix that. So add just a little bit of CSS. I don't know if I need a z-index here. I'm just going to put in position relative and then put top 50%. Cool, so now it's right in the middle. But once again, we only want to show this if the spinner is true. So remember how we did that in the home? We had this map getters. So a computed property, we can do this again. So we'll go back to our top header. We had this computed property here. But this time, all we need is spinner. And we need to, of course, grab the getters. So I'm just going to copy and paste real quickly. Cool. So now we have a spinner here. That's what I called it, right? Oh, I called it show spinner. Okay. So that's what we need to call it. So this would be show spinner. Save that. And now we can do a vif on our spinner here. And oops, I put it in the top header. This is not where I want it. I messed this up. That's okay. We can move it over. We actually want it inside the app view. Did a little too fast there. Okay, here's our getters. Go back to top header. Now go back to app view. Okay, now we have a show spinner. So now we can do vif show spinner. Let's see if it works. Okay. This doesn't do anything, but if we do a search, cool. ABC. Cool. Enter. All right, so we added our spinner. Awesome. So we've pretty much hit up almost everything in the original demo. I think the only thing we're missing right now is the modal. So let's finish with that. So we have this apply. Right now it doesn't do anything. So if we can go back to our card, which I think we call job card. And in the job card, we can add a button. Let's first add a tooltip. So for the B, that's really simple. All we need to do is on the B card, actually we'll add it to the button. To this button right here, we have variant primary. We can add in a v-b-tool tip-hover, and then we add in a title. This is what it's going to show up in the tooltip, so apply here. So now we have the tooltip. Cool. And once again, there's a whole bunch of things you can do with tooltips. Look right here. So the easiest is just add this v-b-tooltip prop attribute, I guess, and then this title. Now the second thing we want to do is actually have a modal pop up, which is exciting. So now one thing I think we should add is an ID. We want to pass the ID in because we want the modals to work right. So let me show you what I ran into a bug real quickly. So you can do something like this where you can put in on your button to add a modal, you do v-b-modal, and then you give it some kind of text like modal. And then since you have the v-b-modal in here, by the way, sometimes you have to put this on another line, otherwise it complains. You can then create the modal, which I will do right here. So to create the modal, you put b-modal, and then you have to give it an ID, and it has to match the ID of this modal right here. So you do ID modal, and then title, and I could get like, I don't know, apply here, info. And then I could put a class in here, oops, with a class equals y4 hello from modal. There we go. Now if you look right here, you click apply, it has the apply here info. And you can see here, if I click OK, I have to click OK 3 times. You're like, whoa, what's happening right there? So that's kind of odd, huh? And oh, by the way, I messed this up. I need to have this, grab the ending of this B modal. There we go. Now, if you click apply, you see hello for modal, but you have to click OK 3 times. And that's because this is getting rendered over and over again, and this attribute right here, this VB modal, this text right here, has to be unique. Because essentially, when I'm pressing this apply here, it's opening it for all 3 of these. So one way of getting around that is to actually pass the ID over. And this is a great way, this is a great example of using a computed property. So we can use computed, and we can call it, I don't know, modal ID. And we'll just return modal dash, and then the props, which will be this.id. So now we have a unique modal ID that'll be passed in. Well, every time the ID is passed in, it'll be unique, we're assuming. And then we can, instead of having this ID here, as just called modal, I can have it called modal ID. And then this ID, we can put a colon here. We'll call it modal ID. Now we have to actually pass it to it. So we'll go back to the home. And we're passing name, but we're not passing ID. So we'll do ID, job.id. And remember, if you look at jobs.json, everything has an ID. So now if we click apply, now we can just click OK once, and it works. Cool. All right, I think we covered everything. Yeah, we have the nav bar at the top with our search. That's hooked into our pagination and our Vuex store. We have modals working. We have tooltips working. So yeah, I think that covers everything. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this series. I went over this really quickly. Once again, make sure you check the code on GitHub. If you see any mistakes, let me know. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.